Welcome to Anatomy and Physiology at Glen Oaks Community College. I'm Dr. Ron Hartung. For this video, we're going to talk about the specific types of joints anatomically and functionally that we find in the human body. In the last video, the introduction to joints, I talked about what a joint specifically is, and of course that is a connection between two bones. Let's talk about the types of connections we have. The first one is a bony joint, also known as a synostosis joint. These bony joints or synostosis joints, this is a place where two bones have come together. They start out as kind of a fibrous joint, but then the bones literally fuse together as bone, and it creates one bone. This is common in the development of children. There are a few bones that start out as more than one bone, but then they fuse together to form one bone. I have two examples for you. The first one is the sternum. It starts out as this kind of segmented structure of several little bones that then fuse together to form one sternum. The hip bone or the coxal bone, it starts out as three bones, the ilium, the pubis, and the ischium, and then those three bones fuse together to form the coxal bone. So again, synostosis joints. One more example, as we get old, we have sutures between our skull plates. And at least in some of us, if we get old enough, those sutures can fuse together to form bone. Kind of interesting. That's bony joints. The two bones come together and kind of form one bone. They fuse together by bone. The next one is fibrous joints. Fibrous joints, there's lots of protein connecting the two bones. Collagen is the major one. And example sutures in your skull, fibrous joint. The name for these, by the way, is synarthrosis joints. Synarthrosis joints. Notice there's a similarity here. Make sure you know the difference. The fibrous joints are the synarthrosis joints. Another example I can give you for a synarthrosis joint or fibrous joint is the joint between your teeth, and this is the one that you can touch. The joint between your teeth and your jaw bones. Also a very fibrous joint. It has the specific name of gomphosis joint, by the way. Very little to no movement with these synarthrosis joints or fibrous joints. And of course, the one we already talked about, synostosis or bony joints, no movement. Here, very little to no movement. There should be no movement in the sutures of your skull, and there's just an itty-bitty tiny bit of movement in the joints in your teeth, those gomphosis joints or the fibrous joints that connect your teeth to your jawbone. There is a tiny bit of movement, by the way, and your orthodontist takes advantage of this when they do braces. They move the teeth just a little bit with the braces, and what happens is the cavity in your jawbone that the tooth lives in, it remodels itself based on that little bit of movement. And over time, you can get a pretty dramatic movement of the teeth. But again, those are fibrous joints or synarthrosis joints. Very little movement. Lots of, I can't remember the name of the protein. Collagen. Lots of collagen protein connecting the two bones, very fibrous. Okay, the next one is cartilaginous joints. Cartilaginous joints, as you might imagine, cartilaginous, there's cartilage between the two bones. And I can give you a few examples. Most of your ribs, it's hyaline cartilage that connects the end of the rib, which ends somewhere around here, to the sternum, which is, of course, over here. So there's quite a bit of cartilage in this joint. Another place where we can point out a cartilaginous joint is the connections between the bodies of your vertebrae. The vertebrae make up your spinal column, of course, and we have what are called vertebral discs between the bodies of the vertebrae. Those vertebral discs are made out of fibrocartilage. So those are a cartilaginous joint. There's some movement with these cartilaginous joints. There's movement between your ribs and your sternum so that your ribs can move when you breathe. and there's movement between the vertebrae, very little individually speaking, but when you put them all together, there's quite a bit of movement to allow you to move your torso around. So again, those are cartilaginous joints. And I forgot to put, these are also known as amphiathrosis joints. And again, this amphiathrosis, what that's really saying is there's a little bit of movement in this joint. The last example I'll give you is the symphysis pubis, which is between the two pubic bones in the front of your pelvis. And that amphiathrosis joint of the symphysis pubis allows for the birth canal to open up very slightly, important during childbirth. So those are the cartilaginous joints. The last one is the synovial joints. Synovial joints are the most complicated joint, and they are also the most mobile joint, the most freely mobile joint. And that freely mobile diathrosis is the term in terms of functional terms. That's the functional classification for synovial joints. They are diathrosis joints or diarthrotic joints. These, again, are the most mobile. I also said they're the most complicated. They have a complicated capsule. They have a joint cavity inside filled with synovial fluid. And then we have to worry about the articular cartilage of the two bones that are involved. That cartilage has to be able to slide over. They have to be able to slide over each other with that cartilage. So again, those are synovial joints. The other thing maybe to mention about synovial joints, these are very important in terms of quality of life. When we get arthritis, that causes pain in those joints, and that decreases quality of life. Pain with range of motion, of course, decreases quality of life, and if the arthritis is bad enough, it can cause a decrease in range of motion, which can also affect quality of life. So more about synovial joints later, and we'll also talk about how to keep these joints healthy. I'll go through one more time just to recap. Remember, bony joints, that's where two bones are joined together, and they're joined together by bone. So no movement whatsoever, and you end up making a single bone out of those two bones. And the synostosis refers to the fact that there's no movement with this joint. Fibrous joints. The joints are connected by protein fibers, mostly collagen fibers, very strong collagen fibers. And the synarthrosis, that means very little to no movement, so there might be a little bit of movement there. Cartilaginous joints or amphiathrosis joints, the two bones are joined together by cartilage, and there's a little bit of movement there. The amphiathrosis refers to functionally there's a little bit of movement there. Synovial joints, again, the most complicated. There's several structures to talk about, and these are the most freely movable joints. So they're diathrosis joints. I hope this helps you better understand the structure and function of the categories of joints. And for yourself, what you might do is go through here and on your own be able to list these categories of joints in terms of structure and describe the structure in writing maybe. And then for each of the functional classifications, do the same thing. Write down that functional classification and talk about the importance of function and how much movement is present, because that's the major thing. And that's it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. As always, if there's any questions, please let me know.